Morning, everyone. I read from the chapter Matthew, chapter 7, from verse 13. So it says, "Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only few find it. Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. By their fruit you'll recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruit you will recognize them. Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on the day, 'Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons and perform many miracles?' Then I will tell them plainly, 'I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoer.'" This is the word of the Lord. Amen.
Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, so that should be a front slide to that, hopefully. No, back to the front. That's it. Brilliant. Okay. And so thank you for that. It's good to be back here today. I was away last Sunday, and I listened to the preaching last night, actually, from here, and it sounds like you had a great time last Sunday here. So, and it also sounded like God was really speaking through people at the end of the preaching. So, I hope people were encouraged through that. So we are coming towards the end of the Sermon on the Mount, and Jeff will be preaching on the closing verses next Sunday. But just because we're getting towards the end, it doesn't feel like we're winding down. If anything, it feels like the challenge is upping a bit, because Jesus is really stressing some important points here. And some of these are to do with choices. I think, have I got control from up here? Yeah, I have. On choices that each of us have as Christians that have a bearing on our whole lives and on our eternity as well. So we're going to just unpack that a little bit this morning. And the first question really to ask is, what direction is your Christian life going in? And we've just heard in that reading that we have a choice of options here. Jesus talks about a wide gate that has a broad path, and then a small gate which has a narrow path. And as I was preparing this, I was thinking a little bit about the different streets and roads that I drive down. I do quite a lot of driving on the M4. I don't know if you're familiar with the M4, but I drive it a lot. And I was just thinking about how you approach the M4 from here. And it's on a flyover, which is 30 miles an hour, then goes up to 40. Then as you get down towards it, and there's the M4 ahead of you, it goes up to 70. So all these cars that have been supposedly keeping to the speed limit, then it's a bit of a free-for-all. People are trying to get to that quicker stretch of the M4. And so people begin to overtake each other. They're speeding up quite significantly at that point. We're all keen to get to our destination. We normally do that without hold-ups, unless you're on the M25 or there are repairs going on the M4. And then you compare that with small country roads. I don't know if people have travelled in England a lot here, but there's some really tiny roads in England. And if you happen to get on one, and you are a driver like I am, who's used to the bigger roads, I don't like these little country roads. It makes me nervous. But they're small. They're very narrow. It's impossible for some of them to pass, for two cars to pass at the same time. So if a car comes towards you, you either have to pull in as close to the hedge as you can, and then they'll go really, really slowly and squeeze past you, or they have some areas that you can pull into sometimes. But on that path, people will stop their cars, they say thank you, they wave at you. It's such a contrast to the M4 where everybody's on their own track. We're going places, and I'm on this, and I'm just going to focus on it. I think the smaller road is obviously slower driving, and sometimes it's harder driving. There are obstacles, there are horses. I don't like driving on road when there's horses. I can see the blank faces, and I can see the people who've done these journeys. And then if you get stuck behind a tractor or something, you're absolutely stuck for miles because you can't overtake them. So there's this difference between these big roads that are fast and you can get somewhere, and then these little narrow roads that are really quite challenging for us. And so the question that we're being asked here is, we need to make a choice. We could go on these bigger roads that are easier to get along, lots of people, lots of diversity of thoughts and attitudes, lots of different opinions, people hold different beliefs, anything goes, you can basically do whatever you want, there are no boundaries in our conduct, people are free to follow our own inclinations and desires, and you just go with the flow to fit in. If we're feeling tempted, we can just give in because everybody else is, and it's okay. There's no sense of challenge that will kind of prick our conscience and cause us to feel bad. And the access to it is easy. It's wide access. Loads of people can go at the same time. And if we're carrying lots of things with us, loads of stuff, possessions, heaviness, burdens, we can take them with us because there's loads of them. You can just travel on this path. In the translation of the Bible called the Message, it says about this verse, the market is flooded with surefire, easygoing formulas for a successful life that can be practiced in your spare time. It's just easy. That's a choice for us, is we can live like this. We can do what we want. We can be like part-time Christians. We can choose the bits we like and the bits we don't like, and we can just have our journey. But Jesus tells us that we shouldn't be doing that. He says very clearly at the beginning of that passage that we should be entering through the small gate, through the narrow path. So what is that in these terms? Jesus tells us that it's hard to find, that few people find it. So perhaps it's a bit more isolated. There aren't these crowds of people going in that same direction. People go in as individuals. The access point is an individual access point. It's not taking all our friends and our family along with us. And there is no crowd to hide in. It's a bit more exposing. This is about you and God, or me and God on this journey. It will be quite costly. We can't take lots of things because there's not room to get through it. And so we're going to have to put some things down. We're going to have to perhaps reflect on some of our relationships or our friendships or some of the other pressures or issues that we're carrying. And it has tighter boundaries on this path, boundaries that are put in place through God's revelation to us through Scripture. Things that he tells us are right and are wrong. And those truths should be impacting our behaviour and take us forward in that way. And the verse in the Message that translates it as, don't look for shortcuts to God. The way to life to God is vigorous and requires total attention. So unlike that big broad road where we basically be a Christian but do what we want, this small road demands everything from us. And in choosing, we need to think about these two paths and what the ultimate destination is of these two paths. It sounds as if it should be easy and obvious. Obviously, I'm a Christian, so I should want to do the hard bit, the God bit. That's what I should want to do. So it should be an obvious thing. But it's not. And it's not only us who struggle sometimes wanting to have some bits of life and some bits of God life. It's not only us. In Psalm 73, the person who wrote this was called Asaph, and he writes, "For I envied the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. They have no struggles. Their bodies are healthy and strong. They are free from common human burdens. They're not plagued by human ills. This is what the wicked are like, always free of care. They go on amassing their wealth." And how often do we look at people around us and think, they've got it good. What they have is good. I like that. I want that penthouse flat. In fact, even as I walked along this morning, there's a property on this road. I was thinking, I'd love to live on this road. Nice properties. How often do we get sucked in and we just think other people have it better than our lives? I often reflect people that I work alongside have so much more time than I have. They have evenings when they do nothing. They have weekends when they do nothing. They've got it easy. And so we always have this struggle between what we see on that broad path and what maybe we're being called to. And perhaps that makes us try and keep our options open sometimes. But Asaph goes on to say in this psalm, and this was the key for him to come to a place of peace about this. "Surely in vain I have kept my heart pure, and I have washed my hands in innocence. All day long I've been afflicted, and every morning brings new punishments." So he obviously isn't happy still. But then he says, "When I tried to understand all of this, it troubled me deeply, till I entered the sanctuary of God, and then I understood their final destiny." So we've got to have our eyes on the end game. This isn't about what people are doing now. It's about what's going to happen in the future. And that's what we are encouraged to do. We know once somebody's a Christian, once they have put their trust in Jesus, that they have salvation and that there's nothing that can remove that salvation. But this passage is reflecting on our place as Christians in the kingdom of God and in heaven. And in that, the reading, we heard the words, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. So this is a big question, and a question I've been struggling with all week, and I was thinking, how come I should have asked Stu this before he went away, but anyway, I didn't. So I've been to other theologians to try and find an answer to this. Can a person who has been saved by the grace of God, but then choose not to follow God in life, do they still go to heaven? What is this verse telling us about that? And a author wrote about people who commit themselves to God, and then they go, thanks God for that spiritual experience and that salvation, and now I'll catch up with you in heaven. And the bit between, they don't really follow that spiritual journey. They don't follow God in between. So what happens for people like that? So there's a quote from Charles Stanley, who's a theologian, who says, yes, a Christian is going to still go to heaven if they have turned away from God or haven't followed God right through their whole Christian journey. But he says it's a very expensive trip. You lose and lose and lose. There is no getting away with sin because of the eternal loss. And it's not of your salvation, but of your heavenly reward. It is a costly experience to walk away from God. So what do we lose if we have our faith, we have God, and we go to heaven at the end? What is it that we don't then have? And here's some suggestions here. That during our lives, we don't have that awareness of God's presence. And that's a big thing, isn't it? The times that we experience that and we feel God's presence, the thought of not experiencing that is quite huge, I think. We feel unworthy and separated from God if we're not on that small path. There's a heightened sense of guilt and shame and fear and emptiness when we choose to do things our way rather than God's way. And we are wasting opportunities. There are things that God has plans for our lives for, and if we're not on that path, then we are not fulfilling those opportunities. And therefore, the blessings that come alongside those opportunities and that plan are taken from us as well. And we won't get the rewards in heaven either. This is a contrast to the verses that follow that actually talk about, not that one. This is a contrast where the verses that come after that, where God is saying, get out of here, I never knew you. In those ones, he is addressing people who don't have salvation at all, who haven't had that personal relationship and that commitment to Jesus. And just hearing that phrase that Jesus will speak, I never knew you, I can't imagine how it would feel to hear those words if you come to Jesus and he says, out of here, I didn't know you. But I'm very conscious that it could be that there are people here who are in that situation or are concerned about that, who think, I don't know if my faith is genuine. I know I was talking to somebody the other day about this, that sometimes all of us question it, don't we? Did that commitment really happen? Am I really a follower of Jesus? Have I really got salvation? So if you are concerned about that, please do speak to somebody. I've got some small booklets here, and come and speak to any of us who are happy to explain about salvation and about how to have that personal relationship with Jesus Christ. I heard last Sunday that there was a word shared about a door with a handle on it. And just while I was hearing that, it reminded me of words of Jesus that say in Revelation, "Here I am, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with them and they with me." So Jesus is wanting that personal relationship with us. And if you haven't experienced that, please don't go home today without coming and speaking to somebody in the church. And so that takes us back saying, is it worth it to choose this small path? Is that got any value to us, given that there's so much happening on this bigger path? And the choice that we take now will impact our eternity, as I've said before. So we have to make the right choice, and we have to trust that God is our helper, because we all know we don't do great at sticking to what God is saying all the time. We are pulled away to other things. And Jesus is telling us that just hearing God's teaching and understanding it is not enough. There's a lot more to it. There's a lot more to experience. And to do that, we have to go through this small gate. Jesus wants us to experience everything that he has on offer. What have I got up there and what I've got here is slightly different. So it's important for us to be action, to take that decision. I was very conscious as I was doing this that in the past I've worked with quite a lot of colleagues in their early 20s, and they've all cohabited with their partners. But as I spent time with them, a lot of them had a Christian upbringing, had been to church, had a foundation of faith. And I used to wonder, how come that's happened? I don't understand how you've gone from that to how things are now. But as they got a little bit older and they were keen to start a family, they all got married. A lot of them started going to Alpha courses to refresh their faith, and then they had their children christened and took their children to Sunday school and things. And I used to reflect on that and think that feels like you wanted what you wanted then, and now you want what you've got now. And in a way, I mean, it's fantastic that their Christian faith drew them back to God, and that is encouraging and incredible. But there was always that little bit that I thought people, all of us, it's not just them, we're so quick to compromise, because there's this flip that we can go back to God and we can kind of flip backwards and forwards. And that's really challenging, I think. And we have to be on our guard. There's a lot in this society that will distract us. There's a lot of things that will draw us in and seem okay because everybody else is doing it. So we have to be alert. And again, in this passage, Jesus is calling us to be alert to people who are going to take us off or try and take us off down other paths. And he's calling us to be discerning, to be aware that there is a chance that somebody might be trying to distract us in different ways. It talks about false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing. So they don't come in and go, I'm a false prophet, I'm here to cause trouble in your church, I'm here to distract you from your spiritual journey with God. That's not how they turn up. They turn up looking like Christians and behaving like Christians and being like us. So how do we recognize them? How do we kind of keep alert to this? Obviously, in their appearance, there won't be anything because they're not going to show that. But then Jesus talks here about a tree as another image of a false prophet. A tree is a tree. You can't hide your identity as a tree, can you? It's obviously a tree. So we have to be aware, and in time, the truth about somebody is going to come out. And it might come out through their attitudes, things that we might observe about them. Are they serving the people of God like Jesus did? Or maybe they are using the church to serve their own interests. Perhaps they're actually about power and control rather than humbly serving in their position of responsibility. Jesus describes them as ravenous or ferocious wolves. Are they greedy for power or fame? Are they there to gain something for themselves rather than to be serving God through what they're doing? There's also how they teach and what they show people are going to give it away. In the Gospel of Matthew, it talks out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So whatever's in us is going to come out, isn't it? Perhaps not all the time. Perhaps most of the time we can be really lovely and kind and gentle. But if we've got that bit of us that is going to come out at some point when somebody pushes the wrong button or challenges us somehow. So how people are teaching and speaking. But it's not something you pick up straight away. Fruit takes time to grow. It takes time for fruit to ripen. And so we have to be alert. We have to have our eyes open over a long period and just keeping our eye on how things are. Fruit, an apple tree, apples appear. That looks pretty good. A pear tree, pears appear. That looks pretty good. But the health of the fruit is important as well. A healthy tree produces healthy fruit. So if people's character and conduct doesn't fit with the fruit of the Spirit, then that's something for us to be alert to as well. So in making our choices, we have to be alert to people who might try and draw us away. Obviously, it's not all about everybody else. We are not perfect ourselves, so we do make choices to do things we shouldn't do as well. It's not just somebody else coming in and causing us to do it either. But in this, in the account of this passage in the Gospel of Luke, it started off by make every effort to enter through the small gate. And that's what we're being asked to do. We are flawed. We are going to do things wrong, but we are being called to make every effort. The Greek of this word, every effort, apparently, is from the same word that we get agonize from, or agony from. So we're being called to agonize, put that much effort in that it's painful. This isn't a little bit of effort. This is painful effort in to follow the path that God is calling us to do. We also got to remember that Jesus is the gate. It tells us that in the Gospel of John. That so if we want to get through this gate that's hard to find and is very small, our pathway to that is Jesus Christ. He's the person who is going to help us to do that. And he's the person we have to go to with persistent faith to help us reach our end destination and the inheritance that God has promised us. Prayer, which you heard about last Sunday in that powerful sermon, that is key, isn't it? To ask God to seek and to knock, to persevere, to persist, and keep on making every effort to agonize as we try and put the teachings of Jesus into actions. And we are called to run the race, to persist in doing what God has called us to do, towards that prize, towards that crown. That's what we're called to do. This agonizing is just kind of stuck with me, that's the extent of it. Just keep agonizing it. But as we know, being a Christian doesn't mean we automatically choose this harder path. God has given us salvation with free will, and so we all take our own choices. To take the smaller route involves a greater sense of sacrifice, a lot more conflict, a giving up of ourselves to overcome the world, and also building on what we've been hearing throughout this whole sermon. We have to be overcoming temptation, embracing forgiveness rather than holding on to hurts, to try and be pure and holy in our behaviors and in our choices, to respect God and his name, to avoid judging others and avoid trying to get people's approval, but be willing to face persecution. This is a tough path. This is the hard bit, but it's a deliberate choice. And if we think it through and we're obedient to God every day, that is the path for us to be following. In Luke chapter 9, it says, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me." And that's what we are being called to do. So I've just got a few questions for us to reflect on as we come towards the end of this morning. Has your profession of faith cost you anything? Did you have to put something down to become a Christian? Did you have to stop doing something? Has there been a cost to you? Have you had to leave something behind? Has your decision for Christ changed your life? Has it had that much impact that it's changed your life? And is your kingdom life evident by your obedience to God and by your service for others? These are tough questions, but something for us to take away and think about, reflect upon, and just reflect on what difference has my relationship with Jesus made. I had a coffee with a friend yesterday, and I was just talking to her about this, and she quoted a prayer which you might be familiar with, from St. Richard of Chichester, which the end bit of that, where it says, "O most merciful Redeemer, friend and brother, may I know you more clearly, love you more dearly, and follow you more nearly day by day." That's our prayer. Let's invite Felicia to come as we pray.